Hello to those people just joining. We're just waiting for one moment while we get set up with our live feed on Facebook. Just a second while that goes up as it's loading. Thank you very much for joining. Really looking forward to this panel discussion. There we go. I think looking good. I think we're now streaming live on Facebook. We just wait till we see it there. Perfect. Welcome everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the virtual festival brought to you by the Trade Decorator magazine. Really exciting session that we've got for you today, which is going to be a discussion all about apprenticeships, which are vitally important, but perhaps underutilised part of skill development for young people in the painting and decorating industry. So we've brought together an esteemed panel of guests, of experts here who are going to be sharing their perhaps success stories and also challenges and thoughts around the apprenticeship scheme and the role in keeping talent in the industry. We will be asking for their perhaps practical advice for sole traders and also for small businesses in getting more apprenticeship schemes and accessing this support for young people. And we have also the Citb, Michael here, he can also share about how we get more access to funding and these types of initiatives. So lots of chance to ask your questions. So do drop them in the Q&A feature if you're watching here on Zoom. Please share them on Facebook in the comments on the Facebook page or in the Facebook group as well, and I'll direct them to our panelists. But I want to say a big warm welcome to we have Julie Lawrenson, who is National Training Manager, Head of Apprenticeships at Bell Group. AD Kopp here, who is a lecturer at Bedford College, part of the Association of Painting Craft Teachers, and as mentioned, Michael Lennox here, who is a Senior Customer Engagement Manager at the Citb. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Let's start my top left-hand corner with Julie. Could you share a success story about apprenticeship schemes from your experience, Julie?
I certainly can, Ben, thank you. So as Ben has said, I'm Julie Lawrenson. I head up the apprenticeship strategy at Bell Group. Bell Group have had a really well-established apprentice programme in place for many years, and we've recruited over 1,500 apprentices since the start of the business. In terms of success, when I joined the business 5.5 years ago, I was asked by George to look at ways in which we could diversify our apprentice programme. And that's what our focus has been on for the past 5 years in terms of working with underrepresented groups. And we've successfully achieved our target last year in that we reached 12% of our apprentice programme are now females. And that was one big area for us of focus. So we've got 12% of our current apprentices are females across the business, and doing a really good job for us as well, I should add. So
brilliant. Thanks, Julie. How about as a sort of a provider of the training services, AD, could I come to you next?
Yes, certainly. Hi everyone. I've sort of been in the industry since I was since I left school, really. I was on a YTS scheme. So for the older people, they might know what a YTS scheme is. As an apprentice. Started life on new build work, went on to doing some industrial work, and then ended up with domestic work. For the last 23 years, I've been a further education teacher in painting and decorating, and part of the Association of Painting Craft Teachers, which is in its 100th year this year. So we're doing our centenary, and we're there to support any painting craft teachers out there that need any support or guidance.
Very good.
Sort of success-wise this year, it's been a COVID sort of year. It's been very strange, very up and down. But I've certainly noticed with some of our apprentices that they're having time to reflect on their course. And what they're actually doing now is sort of coming up to me and saying, do you know what, we've missed quite a lot of time at college. We've missed that practical element. Do you know what, I don't feel confident in wallpapering. And they're starting to worry about how they're going to get that training and how they're going to sort of develop those skills ready for their endpoint assessment, their EPA. So I've certainly noticed that year, a lot of the sort of apprentices coming to me with their concerns, with their reflections, and putting a plan in place really to try and develop those skills that they feel they need ready for their endpoint assessment, the end of their course.
Yeah. What a year to be doing the 100th year celebrations. I bet you've been a lot of Zoom,
fantastic.
Zoom celebrations, isn't it? And Michael, welcome to you as well. What about you from your perspective?
I think, unlike other recessions, construction normally is the first sector to be impacted when a recession hits, and the last sector to rebound. I think with COVID, because of the health and safety regime that the sector already has adopted, whether it's face fit masks, they've already got a lot of health and safety, so it didn't take the industry long to adapt. So one of the benefits of COVID is the fact that you need a very strong and stringent health and safety regime, and you need it, audited and controlled. So construction's been one of the strongest sectors. A lot of organizations worked through all of the lockdowns. Not only that, lots of homeowners who couldn't go abroad or couldn't buy things were looking at how they could upgrade or improve their houses. So even the smallest traders were seeing that they were getting requests for painting, decorating, extensions, gardening, you name it. So it's been a very useful, it sounds horrible, but it's been a very useful lockdown for the construction sector, because the conditions that COVID have created is actually very positive towards the sector. And not only that, the apprenticeship levels, although they have dropped, are nowhere near what other sectors, hospitality, retail, some of those sectors have been completely decimated. But overall, because of the way that a lot of procurement includes the requirement to recruit apprentices, they're already built in. So a lot of them are already built in and kind of future-proofed into the process. So again, the sector's very resilient when it comes to that. So yes, there will be a slowing down and a stretching of the process, as Adi said there, but the sector, because of the way that health and safety impacts us, is very, very resilient to COVID overall. I mean, I'm still not really hearing of any real outbreaks on large sites or small sites, which is amazing if you think about it, because workers traditionally you would think would be one of the most exposed, but because we are used to health and safety, it's been actually a very okay, I wouldn't say good, I would say okay for the sector. Yeah, I think others, unlike other sectors, we were almost ready for COVID. I think with not to boast, but I think construction was, with health and safety, with the way that we look at respiratory diseases already in the construction sector, all of the courses and training that pretty much anyone does to get on site, the carding of people before they even get on site to a traditional construction site means that everyone's already got that health and safety thought before they walk through any door. So I think that's going to help the sector be a bit more resilient to the whole of the COVID impact.
And it's interesting you mentioned that perhaps COVID hasn't had a big impact on apprenticeships, sort of bringing it back to apprenticeships, but we did sort of say and probably I think the general consensus is apprenticeships are perhaps underused or underknown. So maybe we could start a bit of a discussion about maybe why that is. What are some of perhaps the challenges or things that are holding the industry back? Michael, yeah, go on. Do you want to go straight into it?
I think a lot of employers are worried about young people being on site if they're not completely trained. I think, although the health and safety executive have got some amazing guidelines for what you can actually do with a young person, some employers are worried about insurance impacts. Again, most public-private liabilities with insurers already take in risk assessments for training young people, but some people get nervous and think that they can't have a young person on site, so they will keep them out of red areas or keep them in restricted areas, or think that they're the first that should go on furlough, whereas there's probably a lot of digital work that they can do exactly the same as teenagers at college or school. There's a lot of digital learning that they could learn, or simulation learning that they could actually go through, which could actually be very beneficial. So they could simulate wall hangings, or they could simulate painting in different environments. So I think lots of smaller employers get worried about health and safety impacts. They get worried that they're not covered if a young person's on site. But as I say, the health and safety executive's pretty comfortable about it. They've wrote lots of guidance out there. If you speak to your insurance company, most of them tell you as long as you've done dynamic risk assessments and that you've got a work plan for them, which you would have had anyway because they're an apprentice, then you can probably just adapt what you're doing, bring forward the things that are easier to do in either a blended or simulation environment, and hold off some of those things which are maybe higher risk.
Interesting. Would you agree, Julie?
There, Michael, there's the added benefit of small employers also taking young people onto a work experience placement. I know Bell Group have embedded work experience as part of our apprenticeship programme, and for small companies it's very much a try before you buy on both parties, and it's a really good way to assess whether that person would add value to the business. I know it's an area that Citb are going to support moving forward, and it'll form part of that core careers plan. So it'll be nice to see some information coming out into the sector for smaller employers about how they can access support from Citb around work experience.
Yeah, certainly from sort of the smaller companies that I've sort of worked with or work alongside, they're looking at it slightly differently with apprentices now. And whereas I would say 10, 15 years ago, they might be a bit sort of scared that, well, I take on this apprentice and they just leave at the end. They're sort of now encouraging them to leave at the end of their apprenticeship. And what they're sort of looking to do is not only encourage them, they support them in setting up themselves. But I've noticed over the last sort of 5-10 years, they're building a little network, really. So these small employers are keeping on good terms with their apprentices, encouraging them to leave, supporting them leaving. And then they've got about 4 or 5 good decorators that they can actually phone up if work gets busy or work gets slack and they need some help. And it's a good little network, really. And I've seen that working quite well. So if anybody's out there sort of thinking, oh, well, they just leave really after I get them, there's a little bit of a difference. People are thinking differently slightly now. And certainly some of the small employers around where I am and where I work, they've really built up that network now. And as we're all getting older as well, aren't we? So when it comes to that thing where you need maybe some younger muscle on the job, they can borrow the apprentice from their apprentice that's set up themselves, really. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. It links to the, I guess, wider forces kind of shaping work, and that enables organizations to be a bit more agile, doesn't it? Flexible in terms of the way that they, can scale up to meet demand in busy periods and not have perhaps the costs on their books. Michael, did you want to chime in?
The other thing is that most young people have very high cross-cutting skills when it comes to particularly digital products, which are a massive benefit to most construction companies, whether it's a man with a van or a tier 1 organization. Having the ability to run social media, to look at websites, to impact new social platforms, whether it's Instagram, whether it's doing 2-minute videos on site, that they are very adaptable, and that's a very good thing that most young people get quite passionate about. So if there's nothing for them to do in the yard today, don't automatically think, well, maybe I'll furlough them today. Use them to build your Facebook presence, use them to build your Twitter account, use them to do videos of you doing specialist jobs or promoting the work that you do with apprentices. They're very good at it. They do it all the time. They've been doing it since almost their birth. Most kids are almost born with a mobile phone in their hand, and they have forgotten more than we will ever learn as kind of old grizzly people. We are the dinosaurs, they are the future, and we should really use them. And I think sometimes you forget that when you're talking about apprentices. They might be by trade a painter or decorator, builder, bricklayer, but they've got all of those cross-cutting skills. They are adaptable, they have got digital footprints, they are good at communicating. It might not be the exact style that you think you want, but most young people are very good at communicating on social platforms, and they've probably got some good customer service because they're used to doing that quick chat. They're very, very good at that. So I think people shouldn't be just thinking, well, I've got nothing for X to do today, maybe I should send them home. Think, well, could they help me digitally grow my profile? And as Adi kind of says, a lot of these companies, an apprentice could finish, set up a business over the weekend, get themselves a Facebook presence, get onto the local marketplaces on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest, and be getting jobs within a week. And then they're immediately, as soon as they're doing it, they're photographing, recording the jobs as they're doing it. So their next clients are coming as they're on the job. So they're already growing their profile even without even thinking about it. To them, it's second nature. To a lot of employers, we're used to this kind of black and white, write it on a bit of paper, send it to everybody, bring it back. These apprentices are amazing. And as I say, they know things that we'll never know about digital systems.
I was going to say that, picking up on what Adrian said. Obviously, when we take apprentices into our business, we like them to stay with us, and it's part of our sustainability plan. But where we have a young person that's got an aspiration to become self-employed, we have worked with them and encouraged them to set up their own business. And more often than not, they end up subcontracting back to us or a smaller employer in that area anyway. So,
yeah, okay. Let's should we move on to any of the broader maybe industry challenges that we feel, and how sort of apprenticeships are perhaps able to address that, or where maybe there are still some gaps? I don't know if that's something that kind of, Julie, you're quite passionate about and would like to start us off.
Well, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about some of the different innovations that are going to hit us in the next sort of short term and long term in terms of carbon, and some of the innovation that those will present our sector in terms of new training sets and innovation for young people. So we spoke about paint spraying. It's only a small part now of the painting and decorating standard in England, but in the future spraying may become a greater demand with zero carbon, more industrial opportunities. So we were talking a little bit about how some of that green, if you like, training program could become embedded into the training curriculum. And I think Michael was touching on some of the support that Citb can provide in terms of that moving forward.
Yeah, we'll be incentivizing. If you look at our business plan over the next few years, we're going to be incentivizing the increased use of digital trades, the use of modern methods of construction, so that we can hit the targets of net zero. So there are 27 to 28 million houses that over the next 10-15 years all need to be retrofitted to make us much more carbon efficient. If you look at new homes in places like Scotland, from about 2023, you won't even have gas boilers. Any new house built in Scotland won't even have a gas boiler. It will not be connected to the gas system because it's not carbon efficient. All new houses will have EV points, electronic vehicle points. A lot of them will have grey water systems. So they'll have the ability to make sure that we're reusing the water that you might use for shower and reusing it again so that we're not impacting that. And that's fine on a brand new house. But every house that we've got, whether it was built 400 years ago or whether it was built 5 years ago, will have to be at some point upgraded to these new technologies. So, and unlike the Green Deal maybe 10, 15 years ago, where it was things like loft insulation or cavity wall, we're talking about massive impacts onto envelopes of buildings where you could have a group of flats pulling together to have a ground source heat pump. So that then means a lot of pipe work. So as soon as you start breaking into an envelope of a building, you bring in all the trades. So you're going to need a joiner, a brickie, you're going to need a painter and decorator, possibly a plasterer, a finisher. You're going to need all of those trades. So even if a lot of these jobs are for gas jobs or electrical jobs or HVAC jobs, there's still an impact. So for every X thousand of new gas engineers we need to install these new systems, you're also going to need site managers, plasterers, painter and decorators, every trade from top to bottom, left and right. And not only that, while these 27 million houses are getting retrofitted, we've still got everything else in the world. We've got the commercial sector, we've got the infrastructure sector, we've got the heritage sector. All of these things need to happen. And if you look at the painting and decorating trade, they're doing some amazing products for the heritage trades. They're, these buildings that are 300-400 years old, which are used to very traditional products. New modern methods are going in there to extend the life. The old joke about the Forth Road Bridge always needing painted, that stopped. 5 years ago, a new modern paint was used, which has now got a lifetime, I think, of about 40 years. So there are new products, and that's where there's also a role for manufacturers. And I think that's, again, there's a great relationship in the painting and decorating sector between the manufacturers and the actual sector. They're very, very close together. And there's a lot of incentives and focus brought from manufacturers into the actual sector, where we don't actually sometimes see that in other parts of the construction sector. They're very, very resilient.
I think it's a fantastic opportunity, the green agenda, to bring young people in, because they're already engaged and they're already doing projects at school around the green, how we can improve efficiencies. So for me, that's a great hook to bring young people in, give the young people the skills through their apprenticeship program, and let those young people take those skills back to those small and medium-sized businesses for the future.
Definitely. I remember years ago when Dulux Duet came out. So some people might know, if you're young, you won't remember what this one is, but I remember we were trialing it and testing it at college as an apprentice. And my boss at the time said, oh, we've got this new product we're going to try out. It's Dulux Duet. And I said, oh yeah, I've already used it. This is how you use it. So as an apprentice, I was telling my boss how to work with the product. So getting involved with the apprenticeships, all these new products is the way forward, because they're the ones that ultimately will use the product. And in 20, 30 years, they will be doing it. So it is about getting manufacturers involved with the apprenticeships, getting them to trial their products, use their products, and they'll be the ones going out, setting up their company, talking to their bosses, guiding their bosses as well, employees.
The ones ultimately trying to driving this change, just as sort of Michael was saying as well, about kind of the digital skills and around marketing and promotion and stuff that people are doing as well.
Absolutely. I should say, AD, there are other paint products available.
All right.
We're on the BBC. No, absolutely. Well, we do want to get to some questions from the audience, so I do encourage you to sort of type in them as they come to you. But a couple of things just before we get there, maybe Michael, could you just, for those who perhaps are not as aware, but just share a bit about the role of the CITB here, and perhaps some more details on current funding for training initiatives, how to get involved with small business. So
CITB, the Construction Industries Training Board, we are a part of the Department for Education. We're one of their non-departmental public bodies. And we came around in the 1960s, whereby there were various sector skills councils set up, and the government and industry thought that there was an issue in construction with investing in skills and training. And if you think about it, a lot of the sector is small, and it's very hard for a small business to plan ahead with training and development. So they set up a thing called a levy. So you've probably heard of the Citb levy. So what that allows us to do is, for a certain group of companies, and there's a list on our website, if most of your business, if 51% of your business falls into one of these activities, painting and decorating, repairing and maintaining and all these kind of things, if you fit in, then what happens is that we send you a little letter and we basically say, we think you're one of our employers, and we get you to declare your income every year to us, a bit like a tax return. And that levy return goes out every year. If you're below about £100,000, you get 100% rebate on your levy bill. If you're about £500,000, you get a 50% rebate. If you're above that, then we expect you to pay 100%. So that model is very redistributive. So it's taking money from the larger companies who are, benefiting from that wider public infrastructure and investment, and giving it to the much smaller companies that they can then benefit. So lots of organizations, if you think you might fall into Citb's footprint, then it's a very simple process. You can go onto our website, start the process. It takes about 2 or 3 weeks. You'll then be given a 7-digit number, and that number allows you to then start claiming grants. Our most popular grant actually is our apprenticeship grant. About 1/3 of all the money that we generate goes out to pay for apprenticeship grants. Employers can get about £14,500 over 2 to 4 years, depending on how long you are and how complex your apprenticeship is. So they get paid that. They get a little drip every quarter on your attendance, and they then, every time you achieve a unit, then we'll also give them a big pot of money to help recognise their investment in you. So that's our biggest one. So for employers out there that are thinking, it's been a few years since I've dealt with Citb, why are we around? Our biggest investment is in the apprenticeships, so to support the apprenticeship sector.
And we do have coming in. Yeah. I'll just throw it in there now, because I think it's quite a practical one, and people might be wondering. But is there a limit in terms of age on apprenticeships? Are apprenticeships limited to an age?
Oh, maximum, that's an interesting question.
Are you always learning?
That's an interesting question. I think the government, a lot of funding that the government puts in is for the 16 to 25-year-olds. So. So, for example, if you take on an apprentice, I think in England up to the 31st of March, you can claim about £2,000 from the UK government. But after 25, you can still take them on. The oldest apprentice that Citb's ever helped fund an employer take on is in their late 60s.
Is that right? And
yeah.
Adi, is that someone you took on? What's your experience in teaching?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's nowadays with the new standards, they look at sort of prior knowledge. So if you came in at any age with no experience whatsoever, you would get funding for your apprenticeship. If you came in with 10 years experience as a painter and decorator, then it would deem that you wouldn't be an apprentice. You'd got too much experience. So you'd most probably have to go an NVQ route to get a qualification, not an apprenticeship.
Yeah, we've had apprentices in their mid to late 30s. I think our oldest apprentice a couple of years ago was 37. So we don't discriminate at all in that apprentice recruitment process. If people apply to us and they get through that work experience program and they meet the criteria at point of interview, we would take them on. So there's no age bound. There might be age boundaries to meet certain funding requirements, but within our business, we have no age boundary at all for our apprenticeship. Yeah. I can just see a question there from Paul Wilcoxon in the chat.
A great question from Paul. Yeah. Which is for anyone who can't see that on Zoom because you're watching on Facebook. I'll just read it out, which is, how can we make the decorating industry more attractive to new entrants and attract a really good quality trainee? And how can we encourage employers to consider taking apprentices at this sort of difficult time? So Julie, did you want to share some thoughts on that, and then I'll go around the panel?
Yeah. So I did really, in terms of the first part of that question, around how do we make the industry attractive to new entrants? I think there's still quite a lot of work to be done around good, sound careers advice and guidance. I personally am working on a commission in the Northwest at the moment, which has actually been funded by Citb, to educate young people about the options when they leave school. And although there's a disparity in careers advice and guidance in different areas of the country, but generally around construction careers, it is generally quite poor. One of the things I personally would like to see is a real cohesive approach and a linking up of all the resources that are out there in the marketplace around painting and decorating. For example, I'm working on a leaflet with the Painting and Decorating Association at the moment, which can be linked from various web resources, but we've got Go Construct, which is a Citb initiative. We've got various platforms where painting and decorating is promoted as a profession, but nowhere where it's all linked together. And for me, I think the role of Citb in the coming years is to bring that all together, so that when we're talking to young people and students and returners to our industry, we've got a real offer for them, and it's not all disjointed, and it supports the colleges in what they're trying to achieve and us as an employer as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Julie. I don't know if Michael, you want to chip in there from the CITB perspective?
Yeah,
was that the role you think?
Yeah, I think there are lots of things which impact a young person's decision on what they do. We've done some research on it, and there are 3 things I think which majorly impact someone's decision. First of all, their parents, their teachers, and their peers. So that peer group is both the people they work with, but their brothers and sisters. So the biggest impact probably is the parents, and there's been a lot of focus over the last few decades about going to further or higher education full-time before going into employment, and there has to be some recognition that an apprenticeship is exactly the same value as a college or university course. That, you know, experientially wise, they're exactly the same value. And not only that, there's been research done which shows that apprentices are more likely to earn money faster and get higher salaries because they've been in that workplace 2, 3, 4 years. So you're talking about when they're mid-20s to late early 30s, they could be already 5, 6K higher than a graduate who had done a comparable or slightly higher course. I think in Scotland, Skills Development Scotland looked at it, and someone who did a construction apprenticeship was on average earning about £28,000 at the age of 25, whereas a graduate was earning 22,000. So that's about 6K. That's not bad. So I think there's a role for parents educating themselves and not just blinkers and bringing down all the curriculums and all the prospectuses for the local colleges and universities. That's one part of the journey. They also have to look at particularly those young people who've got a creative, they're good with their hands or they're good with their creative mind. So they're into arts or crafts. Julie would bite your hand off, I'm quite sure, for every single kid that's craft minded, that is good at painting and decorating. You know, they like painting in class, they like doing modeling and things like that. Those are the signs. Those tick most of the things that a company like the Bell Group want, rather than the things that they can teach them in college or on site. But if you've already come to the job with a creative eye, if you look at a lot of these TV shows now, there are lots of design shows for doing up houses, doing up gardens, those are the people that get attracted to those, are the ones that there should be sponsorship on those shows for, if you're interested in, you know, the Bell Group, click here. There should be lots of ways, but also we need lots of little bite-sized chunks. The average young person looks at 30 seconds of something before they click through to something else. So we also need lots of little bits of 30 seconds to get someone's eye before they move on to the next thing. And unfortunately, as old people, we like to write big brochures, 25-page brochures with lots of glossy pictures. That's not what young people, they want 3D models, they want to see time lapses, they want to see lots of infographics over why you're doing a certain thing, they want to see the sustainability angles, so they want to see how much carbon's impacted into something. So I think going back to that kind of approach where if you're doing a careers video, think about those things in mind. You know, think about setting up a time lapse. Again, a basic mobile phone has a time lapse function on it. A simple mobile phone can help you do things like 3D modeling, all of these kind of things. Don't almost think of the techies and the boys. That's one of the biggest problems, again, that this sector has. They go to technical teachers and they look at boys. They forget about girls and they forget about those of creative crafts. That sector, our sector, could be really enhanced with that profile. It's and if you don't have any routes for these people to come in, you've already lost a large proportion of people who could benefit from it. I think
some great points there, Michael. There's clearly perhaps a perception thing, amongst maybe our apprentices' parents' generation in terms of that, and so many practical things there. I want to bring it in, Adi, as well, from your experience.
It's also it's not just the UK really that are struggling. Most countries across Europe are struggling to attract painting and decorating apprentices. So I think the last count, there was only 4 countries that had sufficient painters and decorators. One was Germany, then there was France, Netherlands, and then the Scottish up in Scotland. So it would be interesting to see what they do to encourage their decorators, sorts of qualifications they offer, and how and the career guidance as well. Because it's not just UK, it's not just the South, it's wider than that. It's Europe are struggling.
Yeah, Adi, I was involved in a project a couple of years ago with the Painting and Decorating Association that worked with some of those organisations in Europe. It was actually a UNIEP project, but interestingly in Europe, in some of the countries in Europe, females lead the way. So in Sweden, for example, I think almost 80% of the painters and decorators in Sweden are female, and they have their underrepresented group is actually male. So it is quite interesting when you start looking at some of those dynamics outside the UK as to what's going on within our sector. But yes, you highlighted a really good point. The females that we've taken into our apprenticeship programme have brought with them some skills that maybe wouldn't be found through bringing young males into the business. So we've got some amazing sign writers in our apprenticeship programme, and females that have had a real flair at art that have gone on to do some of the other old skills that perhaps the young boys aren't interested in.
Really interesting how you can kind of broaden the mix through this. I don't know, it was some great questions from Paul. If there are any other questions to come through, and whether we touched upon the second angle of this. He mentions, how it's such a difficult time for employers at the moment. I know we said actually, the construction industry has perhaps been a bit more resilient in this recession than previous ones because of the nature of the sort of circumstances, and people can still do that type of work. But maybe we can broaden this question out and also look at the impacts that we've seen coronavirus having on the industry, and where we see it going in the future, and how can we encourage employers to consider taking more apprentices. Michael, would you like to crack at that first?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the first reason an employer wants to take on an apprentice is because they have a need to grow their business. I think that's the first thing that we always need to think about. They should not take it on to access Citb funding or to access government funding. You need to do it because there's a need to grow their business. So one of the first things is learning how to plan out your training needs and how your business will grow. So I think a lot of organizations are very much tomorrow, they'll put off, they'll do what's in front of them and not plan ahead. And I think particularly under Corona, lots of organizations have been forced, whether they like it or not, to improve their digital skills and improve their resilience skills, to improve their access to their employees through digital networks. And I think hopefully as these employers move forward, they can use those skills to start planning. There are lots of free tools. Most colleges have access to free training needs analysis tools. Lots of employers have them too, as well as training group networks. So it's a very simple form where you basically put in how your company goes, and it kind of spits out and says, well, if you keep growing at this level, in 2 years, you're going to need 1 extra head. And that's the point where you take on your apprentice. Get to know your local colleges, get to know your local schools, start to grow your footprint on Facebook, on digital profiles, start putting incentives out there to try and get into parents' nights, to start to talk to parents. Don't just go for the low-hanging fruit, give out pencils in schools, don't just give out glossy brochures. You have to think about the modern way that kids engage with, which is digital. So you have to have, first of all, a digital footprint, but you then have to think about how you can get there. But there is lots of government funding out there. So if you're worried about it, even if you're a small business in England, you have to pay your 5% towards your apprenticeship fees at college. At the moment, I think, as I said earlier, I think the UK government up to the end of March is at 2,000, Julie, is that right? Yeah. It's £2,000 at the government. So as long as you take on a young person with ... then you can get access to £2,000. So that helps you immediately with the admin of taking on a young person. Start planning in the activities. Again, lots of colleges and organisations like Citb have plans that can help you plan in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis with a young person. Don't fall into the trap of giving them a broom and a kettle. That's a horrible stigma that some employers think, first day, show them where the kettle is and give them a broom. That's not, day one, you should be going in, giving them their uniform, giving them a tour. You know, this is what we're doing, getting them to meet everybody, getting them shadowing some of the trades and the specialists. Don't fall into that trap that maybe happened to you when you were an apprentice 10, 15 years ago or longer, Adi. Don't fall into that same trap. The world has improved so much. Get lots of stuff prepared so that when that apprentice comes in, there's lots for them to soak up. But as I say, there's lots of funding advice out there. And the other thing is, don't forget about redundant apprentices. Some companies have struggled during this crisis and they've had to let apprentices go. They are an absolute goldmine to employers that are struggling with the question whether I should take on an apprentice. Because if you can only afford a half an apprentice at this time, and someone's 2/3 of the way through an apprenticeship, you'll get that as a fully skilled tradesman within a year or two, much faster than any of your competitors. And your local government agency or Citb can help you find those redundant apprentices. And again, I think there's a little pot of money that both Citb and the UK government can help to encourage you to take on these redundant apprentices. The worst thing possible is if a young person commits 2-3 years of their life to the trade and as a result of COVID have to walk away and go and work in Amazon. That would be horrible. If you're thinking about taking on an apprentice and you're not sure if you can commit to 2 years or 3 years, but you can commit to 1 year, what you're looking for is a redundant apprentice. So I'm sure if you contact Citb or your local college, they'll find you one. And not only that, you'll get that return. They'll see you investing in them, but within a year you'll have a fully traded individual. So it's worthwhile thinking about that route as well.
Brilliant. So a bit of preparation almost up front that really pays off sort of in the long run. Julie, what would you?
No, I was just going to say I would echo what Michael's just said about rehoming, if you like, displaced apprentices. We've done quite a bit of that over the last few years. Certainly after the Carillion collapse, we rehomed quite a few apprentices, and recently over the last 12 months we've rehomed a range of trade apprentices that have been displaced by smaller employers. But I was just going to touch on the support for small, micro and SME businesses that may be listening in or tuning in. There is a lot of support, as Michael has said, around funding, but there's also practical support. So on the Citb website, you will find a link to the regional training groups. I chair the group in the Northwest, but there are groups all over the country, and the training officers in those groups can help you break down some of the bureaucracy around finding apprentices, applying for the grants, applying for the government incentives, and setting up your levy digital account. So there's a lot of support out there for small companies to enable an apprentice into their business. It's not just around the funding. And if anyone wants to contact me after the webinar, I'd be quite happy to signpost them in the right direction.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, and any other sort of tips and advice for the small business owner looking to go down this route? Is it basically get in touch with your sort of regional colleges or training managers as well? Go on, Adi.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for apprentice, you don't know where to start. A college or training provider are always a good place to start. And then really, if you get involved with them, then they can sort somebody out that sort of fits what you're looking for. So some small businesses want an apprentice that they can mold to what they want. So they'll take somebody quite fresh, one of a full-time first-year student. If you need somebody that's got a bit more skill, the college or training provider can offer a second or third year sort of full-time student. So certainly contact your local training provider or your local college that does painting, and they'll certainly be a good first stop, really.
And then get the advice and contact Julie as well, and
yeah,
Michael.
definitely.
So we'll share people's contact details all after the webinar, and you can watch this again as well if you miss anything. That we got one more, I think, question from the audience, which is, do we think, and I think we mentioned this, but about the perception, but how much do schools really encourage young people into apprenticeships, and is there more perhaps we could be doing there to encourage schools to get young people to consider perhaps a broader range of pathways than kind of just into college or different qualifications? Michael?
I think it'd be very dangerous to paint, to use a pun, all schools with one brush. There are schools which are very technical and passionate and are engaged with all of the employers that are within their footprint, and there are other schools which take the much more academic route and use it to move up the league table systems. I think sometimes the league table systems do hamper the apprenticeship and vocational route system, because some parents and young people use it because get to the best school, to get to the best college, to get to the best university. But the reality is, for most people in the world, a good school will help them. I think pester power is one of the most important things. Young people should be pestering their parents, they should be pestering teachers, they should be pestering and doing their online research to find out what they want to do. We did some research last year in Edinburgh where we got 7 schoolgirls who had said that they never ever wanted to work in construction, and we gave them 10 minutes a day to be exposed to Go Construct. Most of them either wanted to be vets, social workers, or doctors, and that would mean normally investing between 5 and 10 years in a university route, and on average up to £100,000 in student debt. So we got them to spend 10 minutes a day looking at Go Construct. And something like 80% of those girls by the end of the week suddenly had a positive review on construction. They had no idea of 170 trades. They had no idea of the progression pathways, the ability to impact the planet, the ability to take a creative side. We are, as a sector, are quite bad, because unlike other sectors like banking or retail, there's 170 jobs. Which one's the most important? And the answer is they all are. But the problem is each employer thinks their job's so important. So sometimes what happens in schools, a bricklayer goes in 1 week, hands out pencils and tells everyone to be a bricklayer. 3 weeks later, the Bell Group turns up with pens. And I don't mean that, Julie. But you know what I mean? They'll turn up and say painting and decorating is the best. And then a big civil engineering company will come in and say civil engineering's the best. They're all the best. The problem is it's 170 different trades. How do you, unlike other sectors, it's very hard to explain the project life cycle to a young person, the different roles that come in, from design and planning to repair and maintenance, all of the different trades that happen, from everything from modern methods to heritage. But what we would say is that whatever your passion, there's probably a trade for you in construction. And not only that, we're one of the biggest sectors to absorb other sectors. So we absorb more than our fair share of ex-military. We absorb more than our fair share from the engineering and utility sectors. So when other sectors dip, we benefit from that in the construction sector because they've learned all the other skills. We'll train them the smart things. So I think I wouldn't want to say whether schools are bad at it because there's as many great schools and great teachers as there are teachers who might focus on the academic or league table results. But I think probably within everyone's earshot, there's probably a school that goes one direction and a school that goes the opposite direction. But probably over to Julie to give a more practical.
Well, it's quite pertinent really, because I'm currently working on a careers commission in Liverpool City region. And as Michael has said, I think what's quite interesting is I'm working with a cohort of 44 young females at the moment, all of whom are engaged in construction careers and who didn't 12 months ago know what a career in construction looked like. But I think one of the things that COVID has kind of forced is it's forced us to look at virtual work experience and to develop virtual programs that allow young people to see the real range and scope of careers within the construction sector. So I'm working on a fairly new commission that's been funded by Citb. We've had to change tact over the last 12 months because originally it was going to be a program where we engaged educators and influencers face to face and started to do some work in that manner. And it's resulted in a virtual work experience program, which will engage really young students from age 11 in things like the Minecraft games, right through to constructing the cheese grater building, the Leadenhall building in London, and decorating it and putting all the decorative panels on it and everything. So we've changed tack, but what's interesting about that commission is we started with around 150 young people, and the 44 young people that are left on programme are predominantly female. So the careers advice, there is peaks and troughs across the piece. Like Michael said, you've got some schools that are actively engaged with employers like ourselves and who encourage young people to take apprenticeships up. And then you've got other schools like the one that my son went to, where they were absolutely horrified that he was going to take an apprenticeship in construction. So we've got a big educational programme to do between us. And as I said at the beginning, I think that Citb have got a challenge on the hands to bring that information, support and guidance together over the next few years and make that a more succinct process for educators and influencers.
Interesting. We've got another question from Laura, actually about, you mentioned the gap of female perhaps apprentices in the UK, but you know, some success there with the Bell Group. Is there anything in terms of specific programs that or apprenticeships that are encouraging female applicants at the moment, Michael?
Yeah, I don't think it's the whole industry, not only this industry, it's all industries. So Citb worked with some federations to develop a thing called Fairness, Inclusion and Respect framework. So it's a free framework that's available on the supply school. So what you can do is you have to unbias yourself. It's about changing your pronouns when you're talking to girls. It's about like taking names and photographs. Have a look at your website. If it's all men standing around on your website pictures, why would a woman want to go work on on a building site where it's all men? You have to think about, you know, where possible with COVID, you're able to actually do blind interviews. You can get companies to help you with biasing yourself, getting yourself spokeswomen that are positive for your sector. And I think, unfortunately, there are some dinosaurs, unfortunately, in our sector, and I don't think anyone would say that I'm wrong. There are unfortunately some old-fashioned dinosaurs that still think it's a male manual handling kind of area. Modern health and safety, modern techniques mean that you shouldn't be lifting heavy things. You shouldn't be, you know, exposing yourself to dust particles. So we've pretty much moved any of those supposed hazards that would have, in theory, if you take that kind of masculine profile to say women can't work on site. So you have to, as senior managers and leaders within the sector, you have to retrain yourself on removing your own biases, but you also have to try and take that step forward. Make sure, have a look around things like your portaloos, make sure you've got a separate portaloo for female workers, make sure you've got various changing facilities, make sure that you're thinking through that your health and safety and HR policies are upgraded for things like flexible working where possible, maternity rights, that you look at how you can do that. And again, there are lots of free resources, and training groups are really good at all getting access to regional free resources for all of these. Most companies have done the hard work for you. You will not be starting from scratch. Most companies have went through this pain before, but dip your toe in the water. You will be amazed. There's an amazing statistics that I remember from a few years ago. Women are something like 3 times more likely to reach board level in the construction sector when they enter it than men, because they've overcome all of the biases that we've negatively or unconsciously put into there. So once a woman joins, they become a Julie or they become higher in the organization, because they can add so much to a company that they're getting up to board level. So it's amazing for women to come in and diversify and grow the footprint of this sector.
I think that's important. In Bell Group, all the senior management team are female. Every person in the senior management team is female, and that there was a drive and a passion to diversify our apprenticeship program. So that's where that drive has come from. And don't get me wrong, there are challenges and sometimes barriers along the way that you don't account for. You think that you've got all your ducks in order, but welfare is a priority. And I think one of the things that we do through our program is when young people, young females come and join us on that period of work experience before they move into their apprenticeship, we've got demonstrable evidence of how we support young females in our business. With well-being and practical support on site, and we also run a really effective mentor program. So every apprentice in our organisation has an allocated mentor, and that's over and above their site team leader or their contract manager. And I think that's really important. If you've got that wraparound support from day one, then females can feel comfortable coming and working in your business and in construction.
And certainly apprenticeships are inclusive, really. You just need a passion for painting and decorating, and you're there. If you've got that passion and that drive, that's what employers are looking for, colleges, training providers are looking for, a passion for painting and to learn.
And final question, it's got a question from Kevin on Facebook here, which is, and I'm going to link it into what my final question was going to be for the panelists anyway, but he says, I'm getting back into the trade after 20 years out. Has the industry changed much? And I can also ask our panelists to comment on that, but also look to the future of the industry and how do you see it moving, and perhaps leave 30 seconds each. I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, but one wish for the future, and what might that be? So how do you think the industry's been changing? How do you see it going into the future, and what's your wish for it? Michael, are you ready to answer that?
Yeah, I'll be very, very quick. So yes and no is the biggest answer to the question. Of course, the sector has modernised with particularly improvements to health and safety, and to the care and welfare of employers and employees within the sector. However, if you've been through that before, you will probably just need upskilled and refreshed trained to rejoin the sector. You've probably got all the cores, as Adrian talked about earlier. There's recognition of prior learning. You'll just need to be refreshed on that, but you can probably go through it. And as for the sector, I think there'll be some massive impacts in the sector, as I say, through net zero and through sustainability. And I think that will affect us all, because not only will the sector have to think about the building techniques, but actually the supplies. So if you buy a bit of wood from Norway now, you've got to measure the carbon footprint. So why would you not buy local wood? Why would you buy nails from China? Why can you not buy? And not only that, what happens when the building gets demolished? How do you recycle the wood, glass, steel, plastic, all of that into the next building that gets built? So those are the big challenges, but also the big opportunities for the future for the sector.
Thanks, Michael. AD, would you like to go next?
Yes, certainly the things have changed in the sense a bit more mechanical now. So your dust-free sanding is in, which is good for your health, and a real time saver. Spraying is most probably taking big leaps and bounds forwards. Going more waterborne products. So the old oil-based from 20 years is gradually being phased out. So it's more, as Michael was on about, more environmentally friendly, less damaging to the environment.
And what's your look to the future, AD? What would be your kind of one wish, if you like, for the industry that you'd like to see the industry adopt? And it could be to do with apprenticeships, or it could be broader.
It would be, my first wish would be to wish everyone the best for the future. That's the first thing, because it's tough times at the minute. My big wish would be to see the UK as the leading light in painting and decorating. So the rest of the world look at us and go, wow, that's how you do it. We need to get there. We need to see what they're doing, because they've nailed it. They're the best employers, best trainers, best products, and to be the leading light in the whole world would be amazing.
Brilliant. And what do we need to do to get there? Is there one thing that you'd focus on if you had the magic wand?
Magic one. I think there's pockets of absolute brilliance in the UK. It's about focusing, getting all those pockets of brilliance, finding out who's the leading lights, finding out what they do that a bit better than them, and encouragement. The youth are the future, so we need to encourage them to get involved. If we want change, the youngsters, they're the ones that will change.
Perfect. Thank you, AD. That's brilliant. And Julie,
I was just going to echo what AD said, because he's just stolen my thunder. But I think he's absolutely right. We need to lead the way. We've got the ability from an innovation perspective. We've got fantastic organisations that are supporting young people. We definitely need to get those key careers messages out to schools and colleges, and make sure that people are aware of our sector. Work with our trade federations and trade associations to portray those key messages, and organisations like the APTC, and just really showcase our industry as a fantastic sector to work in. I echo everything that Adrian and Michael say.
Brilliant. Thanks. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, Julie, AD, Michael. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks everyone for listening. It was being recorded, so this will be available to watch again on demand, and we'll also, if you've registered with us, we'll share a few links and contact details and things if you've got further questions to get in touch with. So apart from that, I'd just like to say thanks and goodbye for now. Thanks for all your questions, and thanks panelists for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.